A very important video here for all motorcycle riders. Please, guys, share this with all your riding friends because you know we all often don't think about crashing. It's not pleasant. And when we go to pick our safety gear, sometimes maybe we pick the best looking gear, something with a little bit of padding. But my good friend here, the world's quickest lawyer, Ken Schwartz. Ken, you know, unfortunately, because you just went down and your safety gear was put to the test on a drag bike at over 150 miles an hour. And I'm sure that has caused you to look at things a little bit differently, has it?
It certainly gives you, excuse me, it certainly gives you a perspective that probably, I can speak for myself, you never really appreciated until then. I had always, though, taken very seriously all of my safety gear. The first set of leathers, the first set of decent leathers I ever owned actually was a Lou's leather set of leathers, which was, of course, made by Lou. I can't remember his last name. I want to say Osment. No, that's not right. Anyway, he was the guy that used to make Elmer Trett's leathers. Elmer wore Lou's leathers. And then after Lou passed away, I started buying these Vanson leathers, which are clearly the best, although I'll comment that one bit of damage is their logo didn't fare so well.
It didn't fare so well.
But
well, I'll tell you what, before we look at your leathers, let's take a look at the crash. We have this incident on tape. Take a look at this, guys. This is Ken coming up. He is on the far side of the racetrack on the turbocharged Suzuki GS. And we always talk about how you're so much safer on the drag strip than on the street, which you are, but it doesn't mean that things can't happen. Take a look at this. This is qualifying in Indianapolis. Wow. So Ken, your opponent crashes. That was just an incredibly scary incident. There was nothing you could do there. Your opponent crashes, his bike washed out, ended up taking you out. And thank goodness you're here to talk about it because it could have gone a lot worse. What's your impression of how the safety gear held up overall?
I think my safety gear held up great for what it was. And again, you mentioned that there's a lot of guys that skimp on safety gear to save money. And my opinion of that is you're a fool if you do that. You're naive. If you want to cut corners and save money on your bike, paint it with a can of Krylon. I was wearing top of the line Vanson leathers, and I remember when I first started buying Vanson leathers from Matt Silva, he asked me what safety features did I want in this suit, and I almost thought that was a trick question because my answer was all of them. So this suit has every bit of double leather padding everywhere that it needs it essentially in the primary skid points. And I'll say another thing, that Vanson a lot of years ago developed this thing that they've called the spine protector, which is a hard plastic material mounted on a piece of foam, thick, dense foam that goes into the back of the suit and protects your spine. Not many guys wear these because people complain that they're a little bit uncomfortable. I've always worn one, and I've never found it to be uncomfortable, maybe at first, but you get used to it. The doctors at Indiana University Methodist Health Center told me that thing saved my life, and I appreciate Vanson for developing that item.
So get a spine protector, guys.
You got to have a spine protector. I mean, guys that don't have these, which is probably 90% of guys out there, you have no idea how important that was. This thing, they told me, kept me out of a wheelchair or dead. The next thing that you want to always focus on, of course, is your helmet. And this helmet, as you can see, it's
Shoei did its job.
Shoei helmet. This was a Snell. I want to say 20, probably 10. This is a pretty new helmet to me. And in this helmet, yeah, it's a Snell 2010. I bought this helmet about a year or two ago, and you can see that it took a tremendous amount of impact actually cutting through down into the fiberglass, the sides, both sides, right?
Thank God that wasn't your head.
As I skidded down the track. All I can say is that I was fortunate to have a good helmet. We all know guys who skimped on those. This is the face shield, which did break off the helmet at some point during this impact. You can see where the shield itself is broken. There's a piece missing. If any part of this helmet failed, it would be this, although You know, I can't imagine how one of these things would necessarily stay on when it's taking this kind of impact that you can see. So,
So everything you had did real well. I know one of your complaints though was the gloves. What do we need to know about gloves as motorcycle riders?
Gloves are one of these things that I really was naive about. I learned an awful lot about gloves. After this wreck, I talked to Larry McBride. We spoke about gloves. I spoke to Corey Hogan, who's had his fair share of crashes at high speed, about gloves. And the gloves I had were very good gloves. These were Vanson gloves. I never skimp on gloves. You'll see I do have some injuries to this right hand because this glove came off. Now your typical glove has the gauntlet portion of the glove, which is the part that goes up your wrist a little bit with a small strap that velcros and attaches here, and that essentially keeps the glove on your hand. Something I never really concerned myself with
Sure.
too much. You never really think of a glove ripping off your hand.
That's a lesson to all of us. I don't think any of us do, but at 155 miles an hour, they can come off pretty easy.
And in fact, one of the track personnel down there on the big end, when they were taking care of me, told me that gloves always come off. So what happened was the strap, the little Velcro strap, essentially came apart, which isn't hard to imagine at those high speeds because you know how they are. And the glove came off. This glove didn't come off. And obviously there's quite a bit of difference. These three fingers are broken. This road rash here was obviously much worse. It's healed up quite a bit. But I learned how important it is that you get gloves that stay put. Obviously you want to have the reinforced Kevlar or fiberglass, whatever it is, knuckles. And I'm going to give Jack some photos of those gloves so he can link those or put those into this video. But most importantly, and I also spoke to Scooter Kaiser, who's had plenty of experience with safety gear and gloves in particular, how important it is to have gloves with long gauntlets that come up your forearm with a wide strap, preferably a double wide strap that attaches and keeps this glove on. Velcro, maybe, but when your Velcro starts to wear out and it doesn't stick as well, you need new gloves. I personally would recommend at this point replacing gloves probably every 2 years for reasons that Velcro begins to not have the grab that it used to, and the leather starts to get a little bit old. These gloves that I was wearing, I can't remember how old they were. I want to say they might have been 4 or 5 years old, and they were getting a little old, and I recognize that. But I want to milk them to the last drop in terms of buying another set of gloves. And what happened with these gloves was the seams actually blew open. And that was my own fault because that leather had gotten a little bit old and it had gotten a little bit brittle. The stitching, the thread was a high quality thread, which basically pulled right through that old dry rotted leather.
God.
So I learned a lot about gloves. This injury to my hand has turned out to be one of the more significant, although it'll be temporary injuries. All of my broken ribs that I've suffered 23 rib fractures, some of which were snapped all the way through, which is debilitating. And I had a conversation with Matt about extending the spine protector almost around your rib cage, and that was something that Vanson's going to look into. And I know that Vanson recently announced a joint venture of some sort with a company that actually makes an airbag jacket of some sorts.
Wow.
And if there was such a thing and I had that on at the time, it's extremely unlikely that I would have suffered all of the rib cage and clavicle fractures.
Well, thank God you're okay, man.
That I did. But I would stress the importance of safety gear. Boots, the leather on the toes of my boots totally ground off,
Wow.
leaving the hard shell, whatever that material is. These aren't steel toes. These were boots that I got through Vanson.
So drag racers don't wear the driving shoes.
You know, the driving shoes are nice and comfy. They're soft on the toes, but that's the leather that burned right through. And I didn't get a foot injury because these were racing shoes, and these were specifically built for motorcycles, meaning they had a hard shell exterior under that leather, which essentially was just a veneer. Tennis shoes, guys who wear tennis shoes, I think that's crazy. And I'm going to name an individual now who's one of the best drag racers we know, and that's Tom Clemmy. Tom, we love you, but you wear those tennis shoes.
Get some boots.
And I think you're nuts because you touch one of those tennis shoes to that ground at 150 plus, or for that matter, probably anything over 60 miles an hour, and they shred like you've never seen before, and you're going to have injuries that you could have avoided. My thought is, I want all the gear that I can have to avoid every injury that's avoidable. Some are not avoidable. I get that. This sport, it's not, in my opinion, tremendously dangerous, but the potential is there. And if it happens, then you have a problem. In terms of my accident, I've been racing drag bikes for 31 years. This particular drag bike that I was campaigning this summer in Top Gas, I've run this very drag bike this would have been this was the 18th season. I never crashed. My gear, in terms of my equipment on the motorcycle, was all top notch. Anybody that knows me knows that I never, ever cut a corner on any piece of equipment.
Well, heck. Thank goodness you're here and in one piece. Ken, we appreciate it. Can you rewind that real quick? I want to see that one more time before we go here. Motorcycle riders, look at everything. Look at your gloves. Look at how old everything is, okay? As Kenny said, don't let that leather get too old. You want to dress for the slide, not for the ride. We never like thinking about this, but unfortunately, it's a real possibility. Let's just take a look at this one more time before we get out of here.
And you'll notice in this past that I didn't do anything wrong. I raced a competitor who slammed on the front brakes to try to slow his bike down. This was only a qualifying pass too, which makes that action even more reckless. But my point is that things can happen in the lane next to you. We've seen other racers cross over accidentally. It's always an accident. Nobody's going to cross over on purpose. We know of that wreck where John Force, I think, had a blowout, went over into the other lane and took out Kenny Bernstein, and I think they were both hurt pretty seriously.
Sure.
So, these things happen. All right, you ready, Jack?
Let's say one more luck again. Really thankful that Kenny is still here talking to us after this terrible incident. My goodness. Indianapolis Raceway Park. Turbo Suzuki, keep an eye on it, far lane. Man.
And you can see if you rewind this video, the racer to my right was getting in and out of his throttle and hitting his brakes right before the finish line.
Good.
Which is something that plenty of racers do, but you better recognize the fact that absolutely can create a dangerous situation, because what it did to this guy was put him into a wobble, a tank slapper that caused him to crash, and then his bike went right into me. All I was doing was slowing down from a clean pass.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for sharing this experience, guys. This is all meant to be helpful and educational. A lot of research and development goes into this safety gear. Guys, as Ken said, do not skimp on your safety gear. We spend so much money on our motorcycles. Get the best safety gear you possibly can, because God forbid you may be looking at 6 figures worth of hospital bills someday. Ken, again, thank you so much, and keep us updated on all your progress, because we don't like thinking about this stuff, but as evidenced by your arm sling, it happens. So
thank you.
Thank you, Ken.